Greetings, Shelpers. Thank you for joining me today. We are not doing gameplay, we are doing a promised stream, and that stream was asked for technically by someone who doesn't appear much as far as a chatter, but I do talk to them in private occasionally. And they asked me, Toluca, how do you find a publisher? Good question, but as I was doing this, I ended up having more and more slides because I can't just be like, oh, you go here and you find it or whatever, because there's a lot of things to consider, including all the stuff you'll need. So you need what is called a query letter, which is a bit different than a cover letter during our discussion with literary magazines. And I will tell you why that differs in a bit. You will need your manuscript, of course, market research, we'll talk about that later, hook, synopsis, self-paragraph, and agent is in question marks for several reasons. We'll do that as we go along, but this is a brief overview. And the reason I give agent in question marks is that sometimes you don't need one. If you're a poet, you're not going to need one, blah, blah, blah. So we'll deal with that later. So for a query letter, you will need to greet the correct person. Remember, we do not do dear editor, dear publisher. We find out who it is we're aiming at, because you should know a lot more than just someone's name when you're sending it. You need to know what they're looking for, who they published in the past, etc. So you're going to have to do a lot of research on who you're sending stuff to. So then you're going to need your strongest point or book info. And what I mean by your strongest point was on the bottom it says, did you meet them before? So some editors you've actually met at a conference, through other writers, or you won this contest that they oversaw. So if you have a good solid opening like, hey, my friend Barbara recommended me to you because she said that's something, what I'm writing is what you wanted to look at. So you will start with your best point, your best foot forward. Okay, thank you so much, Reiko. Thank you for joining. So that's what I mean by your strongest point. If you've met them before or you're meeting them through someone else, definitely fucking mention that. Okay, so your book info will still have to be in there somewhere. So that means your genre, title, like page count, stuff like that. Like, I'm writing like Blade Island, it's 367 pages of a pirate romance, blah, blah, blah. So your hook is going to be something you might not need at this point, but I put it in there because sometimes it's required. Your hook is kind of also called your elevator pitch. So like imagine like you're in the bathroom with an agent or an editor, or you're in an elevator and you got like 3 floors to tell them everything they want to know about your book, because you need to tell them before they leave, because this is your chance. And don't be annoying to people if you just see them in public and start pitching them. But let's say they saw you somewhere and they're like, oh, I noticed you're an author. Like, what is your book about? And then you can be like, oh my God, here's my chance. Here's my elevator pitch. Here's my hook. Sometimes also called a log line. We'll get through that. And your summary paragraph is your chance to do what's usually either on the back of the book or on the book flap in one paragraph. You can do this. I'll show you how it's done. And then a paragraph about who you are. We've talked about this during the cover letter process in a literary magazine. You can be a little more open about it with a few more remarks than you would in like that 50-word biography that you give a literary magazine or a literary journal, but you don't have to be. And then it says agent mentioned somewhere. If you have an agent, you do want to mention them and, just like say goodbye and whatever. So your query letter should only be 1 page. They're not going to want to look at a 4-page query letter from you. They're not. Your work is going to have to do most of the heavy lifting. This needs to be very brief, succinct, to the point. No fat. Just cut it all to the quick, all clean. So if you want an award or if it's huge and relevant, or you can start with your book info. If you haven't met them anywhere or whatever, just let your book do the talking. Just tell them, this is my book and this is what it does and blah, blah, blah. So first we go for the hook. There are a few ways to do this. You can mash together things. So title by author. So like Swan Lake by George A. Romero is Stranger Things meets Joker. Hey, how are you? I hope you're doing well. Thank you for coming to the stream. I'm teaching people how to find a publisher, hopefully. Okay, or you can do an approach with like this known thing with an unusual element. The Princess Bride with astronauts. I am doing well, thank you. Or if you don't have like any big comparisons, you can just do a log line. And the log line for the Hunger Games here is quite long. It's a bit run on. This is not my example, but it says, in a future North America, where the rules of Panem maintain control through the annual televised survival competition pitting young people from the 12 districts against one another, 16-year-old Katniss's skills are put to the test when she voluntarily takes her younger sister's place. So, one sentence. It's a long sentence, but it's only one sentence. I hope it's going well. I'm not sure. It depends on how well I can teach anybody this. So you have a few options for your hook. I wouldn't use a log line this long because you're going to get into your summary paragraph. But if you don't have your summary paragraph available, as in you're like pitching one-on-one, because there are some conferences that will teach you about speed pitching. So try to be as pithy as possible. So the next slide, we will get into the next part of this, which is a quote from someone else. So it says, your synopsis pitch paragraph. So this isn't about the hook anymore. The hook was that pithy one sentence summation where you give them something juicy, or your log line. But the pitch paragraph, it says, you need to get across the setting, main character, antagonist or obstacles faced, plot and themes in 1 or 2 short sentences. You can also try and get across an emotional hook or twist if you have one, and the key goals of the main character. It's also an opportunity to give the reader a sense of what sort of story this is. Use adjectives to describe the characters and tone to convey the type of story. And this quote comes from Katie Blagden of the Bright Agency, so she's an agent. So I gave you the source that comes from at the bottom in case you want to read more of that. But that is what it is. You need to put all of your juiciest stuff about your book in one paragraph. So you can't, and if you say to me, well, Toluca, I can't just say one paragraph to talk about all the spaceships and lasers and dragons and love affairs and fighting and blackmail, and you can. You're not supposed to give every exact detail of what you're doing. I've been streaming overall for over 2 years now. So yeah, that's what you're supposed to be doing, is giving it one paragraph. You can do it. You're a writer. You know how this is done. So I have 2 examples for you of summary paragraphs, just to kind of get you all nice and riled up and thinking about things. So these aren't mine. After a twister transports a lonely farm girl to the magical land of Oz, she finds herself face to face with an evil witch and her flying monkey army. She befriends a lion, a scarecrow, and a tin man to help her find the powerful wizard who can help her return home. If they fail, she may be stuck in Oz forever. So, of course, this is from The Wizard of Oz. Very succinct, here are the things she faces. A lonely farm girl is definitely a description of Dorothy. So that gives you everything. So just look at all the details they put in. So an evil witch and the flying monkey army are the obstacles. Also, the obstacle is trying to find the wizard to get home. I use a PNG. It's better on my system. Thank you for asking, though. Sometimes I think about going into a gift tuber or whatever. Husband has one of those. So the second example says Dark Objects by Simon Troyan. It says, a woman is found brutally murdered in her multi-million-pound mansion, surrounded by strange objects that don't belong in the house. One is a book on forensics written by a reclusive academic who never works live cases but decides to make an exception on the case. Only the more she begins to figure things out, the more she realizes the killer is talking directly to her through the dark objects. Okay, both very different in tonality, but both also only a few sentences. See how that's done? It tells you the woman is found murdered, so that's kind of the catalyst. The mansion is very fancy, but there are objects that don't really belong there. The light and the dark objectively switching. So you have this very thought out paragraph right there that doesn't give you like, oh, obviously I need to be like, I'm going to tell you what my book is about, period. And then explain the book over the next page and a half and be like, well, it's still only one paragraph because I said in my beginning sentence that the paragraph was going to actually be this thing. You don't have to do that. So you can get it all done in just a few sentences. So we're moving on to market research, and everybody's going to be like, oh, everything's bad and horrible, but you need market research. And I have a VTuber model. PNG tubers are VTubers. So you need comparable titles, which is CT. More if you're querying agents or writing nonfiction. An agent, but some editors will also need it, not just agents. But it kind of depends. But nonfiction writers really can't get away with not having this because CT is comparable titles, also called comp titles. And I used to think it was competitive, but that's not what they mean. So you will need 8 to 10 titles in your topic or genre, like 8 to 10 books on human anatomy, 8 to 10 books on fantasy romance with pirates, 8 to 10 books on that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be exactly on the nose. So let's say you were talking about having a, like, 2 sisters that fall in love with 2 brothers type of romance, but it's set in space. Well, you can have those relationships as part of your comp title. You also don't have to pick a comp title that's just a book. If there's a movie, if there is a video game, if there is something that is very similar to your title, you can also use that. But what you pick should be fairly recent, the last 5 years if possible, because they want to be able to look and find where your book would be on the shelf, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I know about live 2D and 3D rigged models. I've seen some beautiful ones. But yeah, so that's what we're getting at here. You need to be able to tell them where your book is going to fit. So you list the title, author, publisher, page count, etc. Pick solid titles but no outliers. So don't be like, oh, mine is the next Harry Potter. Mine is the next Game of Thrones. Mine is the next whatever. So pick solid titles that are fairly good in the middle, but not statistical anomalies. Like, oh, this is for sure going to be $1 billion franchise. Hopefully you'll get there. Most likely you won't. I'm going to crush your dreams a little bit with this. Okay, even if not asked by anyone, it's still good to know. It's good to know what your other titles are that would compare to yours. Because later on, let's say you get a publishing deal and you want a way to market your book. You could be like, oh, well, it's Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo adjacent, or for fans of Where the Red Fern Grows, or whatever. So you kind of would like to do that as well for your audience if you get a book title. models end up being varied prices. I know that much. Do you have any questions about writing books or getting them published? So I did find or put a link down there to how to find good comp titles, because I did market research for my poetry book, but it's not a necessary thing. Like, I can't be like, for those who like Mary Oliver, you'll like Toluca's stuff. So that's not quite what I did. Okay, I need to take a minute and I need to talk about agents. I know a lot of writers think you need them, and I know why. And most writers will tell you to get one. I don't necessarily agree with that. So that's why there are a bunch of random points on this page to actually talk about certain things. So, on agents, some publishers will actually require one. So if you're going to go to one of the big fives, I hope people can still hear me right now. But if you're going to go to the big five, you're going to need one. Because the big five are like, I'm not going to touch you for nothing. So, but agents will require no money up front. So if you find a person who claims to be an agent and they tell you, well, I'm going to need like $2,000 up front to represent you. No, they're not. Absolutely not. Fuck that. If they require money up front, there is no way they're a legit agent. So just walk away now. Agents only get paid when you get paid. But they will take 15% of your profits. So that means all of your royalties, your book advance, etc. So no money up front, but you will be paying them for the life of a project. So they get your cash before you do. So let's say you're going to get paid from your publisher. Your publisher will give it to your agent. Your agent will take their cut and give you the rest. Thank you, Reiko. So that's how it happens. But the problem is, since there is a transfer there twice, your publisher could fuck you out of royalties and not know it, or your editor could be agent could be shortchanging you and you not know it. They can also take profits for the life of your book. So that means 3 years from now, if your book is still selling, since they helped you sell it, and even if they're not your agent anymore, you can still have them go, well, I worked on the book 3 years ago with you. I still get that 15%. Even if you split ways with me 2 years ago, I still get that money. It depends on how their contract is worded. And sometimes you will want to break up with your agent, which can also be a pain in the ass. And if they're kind of petty, can get you blacklisted from other agencies and some publishers, because they will put the blame on you. So you always have to watch where your money goes. So they can take a cut of the projects not worked on. So let's say they're your agent, but let's say you have a mystery you're working on and they only represent your science fiction novels. You can say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run with this myself. Or I'm going to find an agent for just this one book. And they can be like, okay, that's fine. And then you sell it yourself to, let's say, a mid-sized publisher that gives you a $10,000 advance. 15% of that might actually go to them, even though they did not help you sell that book at all. Sell it, work on it, whatever. Because they're still your agent at this time. And there might be a clause in there that tells you, yeah, you still owe them just because they're your agent, just because the name is on the paper. So you have to be very careful with what they can do and can't do. I know some people that parted ways from their agent years ago and they're still paying the money because of everything that happened in the past. I've known people that have turned to self-publishing certain projects that their agent didn't want to sell, and the agent still got a cut. That's why I'm telling you up front. A good agent is awesome. A bad one will fuck you for life. So be careful. They will submit to publishers for you. So all this I'm telling you later on about how to find a publisher and what to do and all that, they will do it. They will do what's called put you on submission. And their job is to literally have relationships with editors and publishers to get you in the door. So they can be like, oh my God, Jill at Bantam, I know that you will love this book. Or, oh my God, Corey at Simon & Schuster, this book was made for your fall lineup, or whatever. And they will get in there and they will try to sell your book to these people. So you won't have to do that. And now you're going to say to me, oh, but that sounds so much better than like cold querying or whatever, like we're going to talk about later. And yeah, it might be, but you have to remember a few things, including, but not limited to, all the query letters and stuff you're still going to have to write for agents. You still have to query an agent like I'm teaching you how to query for a publisher. So it's really not that much less of work for you, at least on the outset, because you're still going to have to go through all this rigmarole, all these hoops for agents. And agents will have you change your book fundamentally sometimes too. Because I talk later on about how editors will have you do it if you get accepted. And that's true a lot of times. But an agent can look at your book and go, you know what would sell more? Instead of space, they were scuba divers. And instead of being in love, they were siblings. And instead of siblings, they were siblings of war. And you like have this like underwater war book now, instead of this like lovers in a space-time issue. And sometimes they really want to fundamentally change it. And then when you get an acceptance letter from a publisher, the publisher will turn around and be like, yeah, you know about the dinosaurs that your agent had you put in with slingshots in the savannah? Well, no, we don't want dinosaurs. We want rabbits, but then we want the rabbits who have the heads of people. And it just, they change it again. So you have to be really willing to compromise and whatever, no matter who you have look at your book. But agents will give you one round of edits to do before they will even put it on submission. So even when you think you're done, you're not. So they can argue your contracts for you, but they don't need any kind of schooling or training to be an agent. Almost anybody can hang out their shingle and say, hey, I'm an agent now. Isn't this great? Even without having interned anywhere, even without anything. A lot of them do have training and education, but not in law. And contracts are IP law, baby. So a lot of times, if you're going to go to publishers on your own, I actually suggest you getting an IP lawyer. It's money up front, but an IP lawyer will actually help you maintain more of your rights than agents generally do. Because you got to remember, when an agent has a relationship with an editor, sometimes they will not see the flaws, accidentally or intentionally, in a contract. And they will start to think about how to better their relationship with the publishing house than to get you a better deal. So sometimes they will be like, oh yeah, you can have the foreign language rights, no problem, no extra cost. And you'd be like, well, why would they do that, Toluca? Because if you get paid more, they get paid more. And yeah, that's true. That's one of the things they say. But it doesn't hurt that they can also get paid by you, all of their other clients. Because remember, you are not the only person an agent is working with. And sometimes some agents will kind of throw a few bones to an editor to grease the wheels better for future clients. And that might be at the expense of you. So it can be hard to break away from an agent. We talked about that. Poets don't need an agent. No. As a matter of fact, the majority of poets, like the only poets that I've ever seen need an agent are probably ones that like read at the inaugural speech of a president, maybe sometimes, or poets that made it like into the millions of fans on Instagram or TikTok, stuff like that, like Rupi Kaur and whatnot. So if you are just a regular poet out in the world and agents are like, I accept poetry, I'd be like, not from poets like me, you fucking don't. And neither do most authors seeking a small press. You can, for the most part, come to a small press on your own and argue on your own. So now we're on the manuscript part, and you're like, oh God, we're finished with the query letters. No, we're not. It's just coming back in a minute. So for your manuscript, you will need a full, completed manuscript before you go on submission. The exception of this is people who write nonfiction, and that's not including memoirs. Nonfiction writers need a comprehensive outline. Now, that's because nonfiction writers get deals more from their expertise and their platform than a novelist will, than a poet will, than a memoirist will, an essayist will. And because when you have somebody who's like writing nonfiction and stuff, they usually write about their own field. So let's say you're a physicist. You're an accomplished physicist, you know, like all the physicists, you got all the research going on. You can tell them this and give them a comprehensive outline, like what you want to cover, the experts you're going to quote, stuff like that. But for the rest of us, we need a full completed manuscript. You can't write the first chapter as a novelist and send it in because the proof is not in the first chapter. And what I mean by that is sometimes they will ask you for just one chapter, but you better have the full book ready. Because what happens if they're like, yeah, I love your first chapter. I want to see your whole book. I want to see what it's about. And then you're like, well, screw me then. I don't have it. You need a full book, as clean and perfect as you can make it before you send it in. And I don't mean done with the first draft. I mean the 6th draft, the 8th draft. You've talked to your critique partners. You've gotten whatever you can get going before you even hit the desk of an agent or an editor. You have to do it now. Because when they tell you no, and they tell you no without any reservations, you can't really query that publishing house again. There might be some exceptions with certain imprints and houses, and we'll talk a little bit more about imprints later, but for the most part, no. Once you're done with a house, you're fucking done. So you want to shoot the best shot you can. So once your book gets accepted, your manuscript will be even edited even more. Might even be fundamentally changed. We talked about that with the Deep Sea Diver Brothers of War. Now we're going backwards a bit because I have an example of 2 query letters here. One is not mine, but one is. So this one is for a novel. I needed to find a novel because most of you will be asking me, I'm going to be the next Leigh Bardugo. I'm going to be the next Terry Pratchett. I'm going to be the next whatever. You know, Tenerife do. And I need, with everything in me, to have a good novel query letter. So, dear agent, put the agent's actual fucking name. One tent holds dozens of acrobats suspended high above their audience, performing extraordinary feats with a distinct lack of safety nets. Another contains a garden made entirely of ice. A third is piled with jars full of stories that can be inhaled like perfume. There are countless tents, each striped in black and white. There is no color to be seen in the circus, and it's only open at night. Welcome to Cirque des Rêves, whatever. And you're going to say to me, oh my God, this cover letter or this query letter does not go off of the 1 paragraph thing. You would be correct. Because different editors and agents want different things. So, created in 1884 by theatrical producer Chandrish Christophe Leverve and a team of singularly talented associates, Le Cirque Les Rêves is something more than just a show. It is an immersive entertainment experience, but as the years go by and the circus travels from country to country, it begins to take on a life of its own. There are tents that do not appear on any of the original blueprints. There are wonders to be seen that cannot possibly be illusions or tricks of the light. None of the performance, save for the twins born on opening night, seem to age. And even Chandris himself is not certain who exactly is pulling the strings? The Night Circus, because here we go with this, is a literary fantasy dusted with mystery. It chronicles 23 years of history of the circus and a series of vignettes interspersed with second-person tour through the circus itself. The circus is best experienced firsthand, after all. It is complete at 90,000 words. The first 5 pages are included below, probably what the agency asked for. The full manuscript available on request. Thank you for your time and consideration. So, there are 3 paragraphs here about the book. Technically 2 with a little bit extra. But, 4 if you count, the single lines, but you get what I'm getting at. And near the end, they talk about the Night Circus is literary fantasy, dusted with mystery. So that's kind of the thing where you actually talk about the book itself. So they decided to put it at the end rather than the beginning, because they are trying to attract the editor more. So when I tell you how to do things one way, it's not wrong. It's just one way to do it. This is a different way. You get right into the action of the book. Then you talk about the book itself as far as the genre and the pages and the wording or the word count, etc. So some will ask you for the first 5 pages. Some will ask you for the first chapter. Some will ask you for the whole damn book. So this is actually an award-winning query. What I mean by that is they got an agent from this. The author got an agent from this very query. And it actually, I show you where I got it from, in case you want to read more about it. Okay? Now you'll forgive me for my amateurness, but this, with some details changed, was my actual query letter for my poetry collection. You'll see it's very different in tonality. Dear Editor Squidoo, Soft Winter Lake is a poetry collection that covers acrophobia, aging, video games, and pie. The overarching theme is one of the shell. It is approximately 80 pages in length because, as you know, poetry collections generally are not as long as novels. I hope this book reaches tortoises and ducks between the ages of 30 and 60. I highlighted this because it's a vast age range. You should probably not be like that. One of the conceits authors like to do is be like, oh, this book will appeal to everybody at every age, in every country, in every place. And that's not true. So, you shouldn't be like, this will appeal to every woman. This will appeal to every child. Because that's impossible. So, if you can narrow down who your audience is a little bit, that's good. But when I was doing my book, I was just like, oh, fuck it. This is who I meant it for. Who have experienced disappointment as they aged. I had to mad-lib this a little bit because obviously my book is not called Soft Winter Lake. My editor was not Editor Squidoo. Approximately 28 poems in this collection are previously published in literary magazines. When you are writing short stories, essays, or poetry, that's actually very good for a publisher, an editor, whatever to know. Because most people who take poetry collections want to know if you've been, I want to say, tried in the court of public opinion. But they want to know if you have a track record of publishing before, if you might have a ready-made audience at least somewhere for your work, and this is one of the ways to showcase that. So every place in my biography has accepted a piece from this collection. Now I could have said 28 are published, here are some places they've been published in, and do a small list in that paragraph. I decided not to, because reading a long, rattling list of credits is kind of boring. I mean, you put it in the back of your book when you're a short form writer anyway, but yeah. So regards to Luca G, which stands for Jermaine, as we all know, Tertelli, 1373 Ocean Boulevard, Wave, Wisconsin, 94, so all my stuff, including my email address. And then I just put my biography on the bottom, like I was writing to a literary magazine. Not the most professional, but sometimes it's fine. My editor just did not fucking care, because what she cared about was the work. So, yeah, that was my query letter that actually got me published. And I think it was because my manuscript, as should yours, do the heavy lifting. A compelling query letter will not get your book published. A good query letter with an amazing manuscript will get the damn thing published. So, how to find a publisher? This is what we've been waiting for. Sound the trumpets. I don't have an amazing answer because all of it requires looking and stuff. So, publishers of your favorite books. So, we all know as writers, we should be readers. We should read even more than we write. I haven't been following this advice lately, but I normally do. So, you usually read widely, but especially in the genre you're writing in. Because how are you going to know about the conventions of the genre, how to defy them, what's going on out there, what's been overused, what tropes you don't like, unless you know the genre. So if you're writing horror, the things that appear in the mirror, all the different conventions of horror, you need to kind of know them, to subvert them, to use them effectively, etc. So look at who published your favorite horror novels, or fantasy, whatever you're into. They will tell you in the book itself or online who published the books you're reading and love and where your book kind of fits in. So presses of your comp titles. This is where you say, oh, a space alien romance. I was writing one of those and I'm reading one of those. Does this publisher maybe want another one of those? Or maybe it's too similar and maybe I should, cross that one off my potential list because they might be like, oh, this is too much of the same. And yes, publishers will sometimes do that. They'd be like, oh my God, vampire romance with poodles. Well, we already had one of those last year. We're not going to do that again. So, sometimes it's good to know what they want and what they don't want. It's as good as either one. So the third one is publisher lists. And there are some really good ones you can find. Readsy is a reputable place I found pretty much. PW.org, I've talked about for literary magazines. That's poetsandwriters.org. Small presses, that actually will find you some of the more out-of-the-way ones. And we'll talk about that more in a minute as far as like big versus small publisher or whatever. So ask your writer friends, even if they have presses to skip. So let's say your writer friend got a really scathing rejection letter that got everything about their story all wrong from like Black Orchid Searchlight Press, whatever. I'm making up a name. Hopefully it's not real. That's why I kept adding to it. So they'll be like, you know what? That editor is a real big fucker, right? Like the hugest asshole who ever assholed in the book industry. And you're like, okay, I'm not going to submit there. Absolutely not. Yep, vampire romance with poodles. The Breakfast of Champions. So it's helpful to talk to writer people, even if that means just figuring out where to not query. Because if they have a healthy blacklist of places they don't ever want to go again, it's good to learn from other people. So if you have an agent, they will do it all for you. So I just said number 5 is agent, because a lot of people use their agent if they have one. But like I said, don't think that you'll get away with not querying when you have an agent, because you need to query the hell out of everything to find a good agent. You can get published through a contest. There are contests that actually will have a publication as part of the package. So that's nice. You can attend a conference with pitch sessions. Remember I talked about being locked in an elevator with that agent? Well, they have like speed dating for agents technically, or meet an editor, and they will have like 15 minutes for you to really impress an editor or get some feedback or whatever. Yes, you will have to pay for these conferences. Yes, you will have to pay more for these opportunities, but it is an option. Also, I put MSWL on the bottom for agents and editor requests. Now that hashtag stands for manuscript wish list on Twitter. And that will show you some of what agents and editors are looking for currently. Like, oh, I don't get enough botanists turned aliens, or I don't get enough you know, disabled people fight dinosaurs. I don't know, just something. And you'll be like, well, damn, I have this cripple who fights a T-Rex. Like, I'm going to send that shit in. So it does help to know what they're looking for. There is a website called Publisher's Lunch that talks about publishing deals and who got what and all that stuff, but that's not a free site. So I don't really talk about Publisher's Lunch much. And it's only kind of for like research and curiosity, and you can do research other places. So that's why I didn't list it, because I don't want to list anything you have to pay for. I'm a whore that way. Actually, I'm what most writers are, which is called poor. Rhymes with whore, but still. Things to consider. What are your must-haves for a publisher? Good distribution, nominates for prizes, etc. And you need to figure out what publishers can do for you and what they can't. And one of the things they can't do, and I'm going to mention this later, is promise you success. I'm going to be honest here. Most publishers don't know 100% how to make every book a success. Otherwise, everybody would sell well. And we learned they don't fucking sell well. Like, it all depends on so many factors. What's hot right now? If something else will be hot. If something gets picked up in the algorithm. If BookTok gets a hold of your book, it can go far. And that's something that people don't usually expect. Though a lot of publishers now are really trying to get influencers to, like, post videos of them, like, crying or screaming about the book and stuff like that. So they are trying to, like, work with influencers to manufacture that kind of authentic reader experience, which is a whole other video for a whole other day. But they can do a bunch of different things for you. And good distribution means it's in more platforms and more stores and more places. And unless you're like Harry Potter or whatever, which I hate going back to that, to be honest, but it's something everybody knows, you're not going to get in Walmart generally. You will get on Amazon, you will get on Barnes & Noble, you can get on Kobo if they have an ebook version, stuff like that. Shoot for as high as you can for distribution, but it's not the only thing to look for. Some places nominate for prizes. My Press does, but when they nominate, they only nominate for things that they don't have to actually spend money on. And because My Press is very small, I understand that. So your press might not send out to like a lot of different awards for you to win unless they're sure of it. Some will, though. There are a lot of other things to consider. Have the editors been given any kind of like good feedback from the authors they're with? Like, oh my god, Janet at like Garden House Press was amazing and she totally got my work. Maybe that's the kind of thing you need and are looking for, is somebody who just fucking gets what you're trying to do. So there are a lot of different factors to consider, and not just, hey, how much money are you going to give me? Like, how big of a percentage of the royalties? How big of an advance are you going to give me? There's way more to consider than that. Are authors happy with the press or not? Are there red flags? We will talk about red flags in a different slide. So some authors will end up dropping a press, but they can't really say why, because you don't want to badmouth your press, just like you don't want to badmouth your agent, because word gets around, and even though if it were the agent's fault or the press's fault, it can come back on you. So I'm going to give an example of this. Before my book came out, I was accepted by another press with a smaller book called a chapbook. And the chapbook was actually accepted by a press that I had heard great things about. Like amazing things. Like they had great covers, they had great distribution, they really got their authors, they knew what they were trying to do, they got the books into the hands of the readers. It was incredible. Like they took them like all different places and they were at like AWP and all that kind of fun stuff. So I was like, yes, this is amazing. I was accepted by them. My first acceptance for any kind of book related thing ever. I was over the moon. And then Communication got less, and the longer silences stretched on, and 1 year became two, two became three, and I'm just like, people who've gotten their books accepted by this publishing place got it after me, and what am I doing wrong? And I didn't want to be a bother, but then I started asking more, and I would get, oh, your book is coming out in the fall. Oh, wait, we had to push it back. Your book is coming out in the spring of next year. Oh, wait, something went wrong. Can you help me with this? And then it'll come out in the summer. And it kind of was like that if I got an answer at all. And eventually I pulled the book because all it was being sat on. I told her at the time was a lie. I said to the publisher that I was going to try to get a full collection published instead of a chapbook. So we parted way on amicable terms. But what she doesn't understand is that I had looked up complaints on the Better Business Bureau because I saw one thread on Twitter about the press, and that sent me down a fucking rabbit hole. Well, they're getting good press and like newspapers and magazines, and they're showing all their processes and all this kind of shit. And like everybody talking about, oh, I got published with this press and I'm so happy and it's amazing. I looked up their stuff and I found a thread that was old but kept updating every time something else happened. And I found it that there were complaints about people not getting the books they ordered, them not publishing the person at all that they accepted. Hello, I'm that person. But that wasn't me at the time. And all this other stuff. And they're like, you should check out their Better Business Bureau. You should check out their Yelp reviews. And I started doing that because I hadn't done that before. And oh my fucking Christ, when I actually looked, there was stuff out there. It was buried under the, oh, they won another award. Oh, they have this new author coming out who is like the hottest thing in the Midwest or whatever. So outside of all the good press, there was like this like chattering, like barely audible on the internet. And to this day, most of what I see when I check out the press that had my book at one point is nothing but goodness. People that are so grateful that this press took a chance on a humble poet, and oh my God, it's my dream come true. They were one of my dream presses. I know, girl, mine too. But I didn't see all the other stuff because when I looked for like this press scam or that thing scam or legit or whatever, it didn't come up. So even if you do your due diligence like I had done, you got to keep looking because you never know. And to be fair to me, a lot of that stuff actually came up after I was accepted, and whilst I was waiting for those 3 years, more bad stuff came out. But you still have to keep looking. And that's what I did. And that's ultimately why I pulled the book. Not just waiting, because I can tell you, I felt 1000% fucking sure if I pulled it, even if we left on good terms, no one would ever publish me again. I felt like I was the worst poet in the world. No one would want my stuff. They must have regretted accepting me at all. And it really threw me into a spiral because I really wanted to be published there. And I thought this was my only chance. It always feels like your only chance. But I gotta tell you, Shelpers, it's not your only fucking chance. There are thousands of publishers out there, thousands of magazines, new ones every day. People close down, open up, do something new. It's gonna be okay. If you have to walk away from an offer, it's fine. You don't want your work held up in purgatory for fucking ever. Take it from your old ass turtle auntie, okay? So, are there rights you don't want to give? And research rights and clause definitions. Even if you have someone else arguing your contract for you, know what the boilerplate says. Know what your agent is talking about. Know these things. And if you don't know, get acquainted. Because there are quite a few red flags in any contract that can fuck you over. Including, like we've talked about before with my contract, is there a termination of rights clause? Or can they literally keep your stuff forever without reverting it back to you? That's another thing I was worried about with the press that took my stuff. I'm like, are they going to fight me for the rights? Because some presses, even though they're not going to do anything with your work, they fight you. They fight you hard. Even if they've never paid you a dime, they fight you hard. So you have to know what you're doing. Even if you're not the one doing it, still educate yourself. Because you want to make sure everybody has your best interest at heart. And a lot of editors and agents, they do. They want everybody to be successful. That means the three of you, the agent, the editor, and you. But sometimes you don't factor in, or you only factor in at the very end. And you're the one providing them with the creative material they're going to give the masses. So you have to, if you're not going to fight for you, who's going to fight for you? And the best way to arm yourself is arming yourself with knowledge, okay? I understand that knowing all this boring shit isn't going to be fun, but this could save your fucking bacon. It really could. And you want to be able to have your bacon saved. Again, source, trust me. How much creative control do you want? Do you want cover or typeface input or edit vetoes? So let's say you want a specific thing on your cover, like a pirate ship, totally in case is what you're about. But they're like, no, all we want is a sword sticking out of the sand. And you're like, that's not going to sell. That looks like a self-published thing. Do you want the veto? My publisher, thankfully, see, one of the things about small publishers is you don't have too many people to argue with. And one of the things that was so great about my publisher is that they didn't argue with me. They said, what do you want on your cover? Let's see if we can make that happen. What do you envision for this book? And they listened to me. And my editor is also the publisher of my press was also a book cover designer back in the day. So she started there, moved over to something else. So she actually did mock-ups for what I requested. And any changes I got. So you're not going to have that much control normally. Unless you work with a very small press. But also, there are bad parts about working with small presses and good parts. You get maybe more creative control, but they might not have the money to send out a lot of review copies for you. Or they might not have as many distribution channels. Or they won't help you with X, Y, and Z. So you have to decide what you want and what fits you best. So even the big five probably won't promote you too much. Because this is what I want to get at. And one of the biggest reasons people want to go to the big five is they're like, oh my God, they're going to send me on book tours. They're going to put banners on Facebook. They're going to do all the things for me. They're going to set up a blog tour. They're going to get me on interviews. I'm going to be on fucking NPR, baby. I'm going to be on CNN. No, you're not. No, you're not. Sit down. Sit down. It's okay. Let Auntie Toluca explain a few things. If you're not Stephen King, if you're not J.K. Rowling, if you're not one of these big people, they ain't putting shit into you. I'm sorry that you're not Neil Gaiman. I wish we all were. I wish we all were George R.R. Martin, because at least we'd be writing a little faster. Yes, that's a dig. But the thing is, these big five publishing houses, they're going to look at you, the debut author, and unless you are totally guaranteed to catch fire, which most of you will not be. I'm sorry, you're not the unicorn, you're not the zebra, you're the horsey. And you're the horse where there are all other horses on the plains, and you're all running together, and you're not even don't even have the most beautiful mane or tail, so you're not going to stand out that way. You don't particularly run in a funny or fancy way, so you're not going to stick out that way. But you're a good solid horse, okay? But they're not going to promote you because you're a good solid horse. They're going to promote you if you're a fucking unicorn. And sometimes they manufacture unicorns, okay? They do. They will take a horse, take it out of the herd, they will train it, they will glue a horn onto its head, they will give the unicorn mane a dye job, a rainbow dye job, and they will put you out there as a unicorn. But for the most part, they will not do that. So if one of your big reasons to go with the big five is to get all this promotion, there's only so much they can do for you. There's only so much they're willing to do for you. Because you got to remember, they're pumping out books like a factory. And your book is one of them. And I'm going to tell you this again. The biggest cheerleader you have is you. The biggest asset you have is you. So that means you're going to be doing most of the promotion for yourself. You're going to be doing most of the advocating for yourself. Your agent, if they're a good agent, they will do what they can for you. They will recommend things. Even if your press is small, they will do what they can for you. Part of it is putting together a good eARC distribution on NetGalley. Part of it is helping you get nominated for those prizes, even if they can only nominate for free ones. Part of it is like giving you ideas. Some really small teams of houses will actually work harder to at least give you the skills to do it yourself. So I want for you the Big Five dream with the multi-city tour. I want for you the huge fucking advance that like is champagne and caviar and wiping your ass with $100 bills. But you're not going to get that for the most part. Not even from a Big Five. But if you do want a Big Five, there is kind of a way to backdoor if you don't have an agent. And I don't remember if I put it later on or now. I'm going to just look for one. No, I didn't. Okay. So there is something called imprint. There is something called imprints. And an imprint is a smaller, it's almost like a house unto itself, but it's not. It's like another label under the umbrella of a big company. And imprints usually want specific types of books. Like, oh, this is Hachette's like young adult imprint, or this is Penguin Random's like fantasy imprint, or whatever it is. And there are imprints that are looking for very specific things at very specific times. And you can backdoor into a Big Five by going with an imprint. It'll be the imprint's name on your book, but you will have a lot of the same pluses. I guess we'll call them pluses. I said that word the first time. We'll call them pluses with the imprint. So if you don't have an agent, a lot of imprints will still look at your stuff, where the Big Five itself or the big names under their umbrella will not. So if you are dead set on a Big Five, you can probably backdoor in through an imprint. And maybe if your book does well, maybe the next one will get picked up by the Big Five itself. You know, it was almost a Big Four, but Simon & Schuster still exists, but they were bought up by a company that I don't think is going to be doing very well by them. So just a heads up there. So if you don't have an agent, shoot for an imprint. That's what I'm telling you. You can backdoor into one of these big companies by hitting one of their smaller labels. You're incredibly unlikely to get rich. Yes, I'm going to hammer this home again, because $5,000 to $15,000 for a debut novel is common. Okay, and we've talked about advances before, right? And an advance is split up to at least 3 to 4 different payments. So let's say you worked on this novel for 2 years before you got it accepted, and you're finally signing the contract a year after that. So let's say it's been a 3-year wait. Even a bigger house might only give you $10,000. And that's cut up into 3 payments, let's say, if not 4, but let's say 3. The day you sign the contract, the day you turn in your edits, and the day it's published. Okay? And those days are pretty fucking far apart. You sign the contract, that'll be like $3,000, let's say $3,300. You finish the edits, let's say that's a year down the road. Maybe 6 months because you're speedy. That's another $3,300. When you get the book published, which is a year from when you turn in the edits, because they need to figure out where to put it in their slot. They need to design a cover. They need to figure out where they're putting you and it and all that other fun stuff. That's a year after, and then you get $3,300 more dollars. Plus, if you had an agent, this is the good part. Are you ready? 15% of that $10,000 is already theirs. And I'm not even talking about taxes yet. And you do owe taxes because you are getting paid. And it is a job. So you owe the government part of your $10,000. You owe 15% of your $10,000 to your agent. And you get the rest for yourself after 3 years of work. Finding an agent, finding a publisher, doing all the edits after the first draft, writing the first draft, researching everything for the first draft, researching all the places to submit to, all the months of no's and eating chocolate and drinking wine because you're the worst writer on the planet because nobody wants this book and what were you fucking thinking? And you have less than $10,000 in your pocket for the pleasure. I'm not trying to steer you away from writing. Writing is something you're called to do. Some people only want to see their book in print. I know a lot of people who go self-publishing because it's the fastest way. It's the way with most control. Yes, they have to put out money up front, but, you know, they get all the profits and everything like that. And I understand that. But you're not going to get rich, especially not off of one book. But I'm not trying to tell you that to get you to stop writing. I'm trying to get you to realize that this is not the way to be rich. I hope you do get rich. I hope so. I hope your every writer fantasy just sprinkles down on top of your head. But it's not going to happen. For the vast majority of us, it's not going to happen. Now, I'm a poet, so I never expected a lot of money to begin with. And I'm going to tell you honestly that because of the sales and everything like that, I have made not from sales from my book, from in person, but my publisher, there we go. It's not so hard, Toluca, god damn it. My publisher sent me in March my first paycheck. It was outdated by a year, so I couldn't cash it, and I didn't tell her. But it was less than $80. I get paid every 6 months. And one of your first paychecks is your biggest paycheck. Your first one should be your biggest, pretty much. Because that's when everybody's interested, that's when everything is new, and I got less than $80 for the pleasure of years of work, of putting poems in magazines, etc., etc., etc. I've told all of you how I've done what I've done, everything like that. Less than $80. And remember, Uncle Sam gets a cut of that. So, here we are, Born to be Kings, and we're looking at red flags. I keep on running through these red flags. Okay, so bad reputation, lots of unhappy authors. So if you go on the Better Business Bureau, if there's a lot of never received my books, if there's a lot of stay away, this is a scam, if there are unhappy authors where they're like, I'm never going to work with Eyewear Publishing again. Eyewear Publishing, I'm looking at you. I'm calling you out by name, you fucking awful press. Eyewear Publishing had a controversy a while ago, and they basically said, now I don't agree with their thing because everything they publish, including anthologies, they actually ask for money for. And that's bad practice in my book, but it was how they actually turned over a profit, so make of that what you will. And they said that if their authors actually, or poets, went to another publishing house for like their second or third book, they will have nothing to do with them ever again. And I thought, my God, the cojones on you. Absolute balls. My God. Eggs the size of the moon. That was so shitty. Absolute crap. And they already had a bad, pay-to-play business model anyway. But when they did that, that was just, whoa. My second poetry book is not going to be published by my first publisher because it's in a different genre. And my publisher would never say to me, yeah, Toluca, get fucked. So, lack of transparency. Who runs it? How many editors do they have? What are their names? Have they published anywhere? Have they written any books? Have they went to college anywhere? How many years of experience do they have? Etc., etc., etc. How is it structured? Lack of transparency. You need to know who you're writing, why, blah, 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 blah. So always make sure they have a masthead, which gives like everything. And then some. So make sure they're transparent. Promises of success. I'm going to make you the next, like, as big as the Bible. Your book is going to be as big as the Bible. It's going to sell millions of copies every year. Worldwide. Every year for the next 2,000 years. The biggest person that ever lived. Run away. Because, as I've said before, publishers and editors and agents, they can't promise you success. They can't promise you the cover of Time magazine. They can't promise you a poem in the New Yorker once you get your book published. They can't promise you a Kirkus starred review. They can't promise you all of this stuff. And they shouldn't. I mean, yeah, they could probably pay for Kirkus, but you get what I'm saying. They tell you you're going to make millions of dollars in royalties and have a merch line and all that stuff. Run far, run fast. They cannot promise shit. They can't even promise there are going to be bagels in the break room tomorrow. Do not give in to those sweet little lies. So they recommend you specific editing services. Oh, you know, Tom, your book would be so amazing if you would just work with this here editor at this here place. And don't worry about the kickback I might receive by telling you that you would benefit from going to this place. Don't look at the connection we may have through the lack of transparency we have. Don't worry about it. And we may not actually publish you after you spend $13,000 trying to get your book edited, which is a scam in itself. I don't mean editors that you pay for. I mean $13,000 to edit a manuscript. I've never seen it that high. Or they try to sell you packages. I'm going to now request my husband give me a drink of water because I've been talking nonstop since the inception of this. Hold on. Okay. Thank you. So your publishing house is like, oh my God, we're totally legit in a traditional publishing house, but you're going to have to pay us like $10,000 to get your book out to like Amazon and all these other places, like all these ad places. No. Your publisher should not give you like these large packages of whatever. Oh, it's a book cover design, whatever. You're not self-publishing here, you're traditional publishing. You shouldn't have to pay for your own cover art unless your, publisher is so small that they'll make you a cover, but if you want something else, you can try to make it or find it yourself. That's kind of a different story. But for the most part, no. Like, I'll give you an example. My second potential publisher, I haven't signed the contract yet. I see it this summer. Hold on. Told me that he will design covers. He thinks they're not absolutely the best, but they're manageable and they get the job done. And if I wanted something else, I could approach someone else to work with. So that's kind of how he put it for me. So that's completely different. But if they try to sell you packages of services and stuff, they're a vanity publisher, a self-publisher. You don't want to go there unless you're... And if you're self-publishing, there are a lot more genuine and general ways to get a good editor, a good cover designer, a good whatever the hell you need. To not go through one of these like really expensive, scammy vanity publishers or houses. So they require a certain number of pre-orders. Oh, Finishing Line Press. I mean, sorry, we're not supposed to say names here. By the way, they require a certain amount of pre-orders. Everybody says they're legit. I don't consider that legit. Because they will not publish you unless you have a guarantee that at least how many ever people will pre-order your book or order your book. It's almost like they don't want to take a risk on you because here's the thing. Publishing is a gamble. They don't know how well your book is going to do. You don't know how well your book is going to do. You're all just going to do the best you can, dang it, and throw your lot in together. But certain publishers are like, well, we don't really want to take the hit, so we're going to have to make sure that we're not going to, or at least too big of a hit. So we're going to make sure the author goes around, yes, the author, and demands their family and shit buy their book enough so that the pre-orders actually can take at least some of the sting out of their risk. And I don't agree with that. I know publishers go under every day. I know publishing is dangerous and risky and all that stuff. But you know what you fucking signed up for. You absolutely know what you signed up for. You know, you don't put that back on the authors. The authors, I don't like it when authors don't promote their work or don't do readings or whatever they can. And as a disabled author, I know I can't do as much as some people who can like load up a van and go across the country and tour libraries and stuff with their book. I can't do that. But I am putting my work on Instagram. I am reading at the local places I can read at or whatever places I can read at. I am doing lives online. I am maintaining my blog and my social media accounts. There are some people who will literally publish with a publisher and then walk away. Like, well, the publisher has to do it all for me or it's not getting done. It's not my problem. But it is. You should be trying to, as an author, get your work into as many hands as possible. But your publisher should also not be like, oh, no, you have to make sure that we don't ever have to take a risk by making sure we have pre-orders. Or they demand a huge sum of money up front to publish. That's not a traditional publisher either. And like I said, if you want to go the route of pays a lot of money up front, just publish your book yourself. Don't go to one of these publishing houses. Unless what you're looking for is called a hybrid publishing house, which is different. We're talking about traditional publishing here right now. Some fees can be legit. So a lot of times you will pay like $20 to enter a contest to potentially get your first novel published, etc. That's legit. Because they're not asking you for like thousands of dollars at a crack or even hundreds. They're just asking you for the contest fee. But not every fee is legitimate. Like, there are so many publishers that don't require a fee that are legitimate that you really shouldn't pay a fee unless you know somebody is legitimate and you want to be with them badly. So, communication is spammy or error-filled. I'm going to be mean here. And I know there are a lot of people where English is their second or third language and they run legitimate houses. I'm not saying that. But if everything you get from them is error-ridden, then you might have a problem. How are they going to work with you on your book and make it the best book it can be when every sentence is using something wrong or something is misspelled or whatever? It's not going to go well for you. It's not going to go well for them. And yes, you should have editing. When a publisher says, we don't need to edit anything in this book, you have a problem. I was assigned an editor at my tiny ass publishing house. I worked with an editor. I communicated directly with the publisher because it's a small house, but I also had an editor who worked with me. And we talked about cuts and what happens with each poem and if something needed a different, like, sentence structure, whatever it is. But I had an editor assigned to me. And you should have someone who works with you as well. This should not be, we're going to just put it up wholesale. That's another red flag in itself, is no editing at all. And their communication is spammy, so reputable publishers will not email you first. They will not. Publishers, legit ones, are inundated with hopeful authors such as yourself trying to get in their doors. So why the fuck would they reach out for more? They have to even reject sometimes good, solid books because it's not in their wheelhouse, or they don't think they can sell it, or they published something way too similar, way too close to possibly accepting yours, so they can't, or it comes really close, but like the first person POV really irritates the editor or the whatever, or the publisher, whatever, and they can't do it. Whatever it is, they can't do it. They only have so much money to take on so many titles a year, and they already have 8, and you would be number 12, because they already are overbooked. There are a lot of reasons a good book gets passed over. But every legitimate publisher will have more books sent to them than they can accept. So if there is a publisher, or an agent in this case too, that comes out of the blue and says to you, hey, I hear you're a writer, I'm blah, 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 blah. That's mostly 99.9% of the time is not legitimate. So most of the time they will not message you first. They are just not that into you. And, and you have to make sure. So oftentimes it will be a spammy email. There is the occasion where if you have published in a reputable place, like let's say you got a feature in the New York Times, you might have an agent say, hey, I read your piece in the New York Times. I'm Layla Blogden from the Falala Agency, and I absolutely loved your piece on walruses who make tables in the Arctic. And I just think that you would be perfect for making a whole book about walruses and the different types of carpentry they can do in the summer months in the Arctic Circle. And then you might have a legitimate offer or a legitimate query into you, but that is exceptionally rare. Exceptionally rare. And for the most part, they will not talk about anything you've written when they're spamming you. They just know that you are a writer, and all writers want to get the phone call, the email that says, yes, you're special and you're wonderful, and here is a representation, or here's a book offer. So they will not find you first. You have to find them. They play hard to get. And then we have the last slide here, and it's just more resources on like writing a cover letter, what log lines are, the paragraph pitch I told you about, query letters in general, the website for the manuscript wish list if you want to just kind of poke around there a bit. Mostly you'll find stuff by doing the hashtag, poetry presses without reading fees. This is invaluable because a lot of poets have to do contests and pay money and shit through the contest to get even looked at. So this is helpful. Even without contests, a lot of poetry publishers have fees. Even legit ones. Source, trust me, bro. Our open reading period is only $15 to consider your work and stuff like that. So, yeah. Also, PNW, like Poets and Writers, pw.org, we'll have stuff for poets, we'll have stuff for short story writers and stuff like that as well. So, don't give up. Don't pay fees if you don't want to. And at the end of it, I actually put contract clause red flags because I want you to know kind of what you're signing, what something really bad looks like. It won't cover everything, but it will give you some sort of a baseline to be like, okay, that's something I have to walk away from. So that's all I have. I probably missed something. I probably told you something incorrect, or my stuttering probably fucked something up, but this is basically how you go about it. The methods of like looking through like the internet and finding titles that might fit where you want to be, and then submitting to the publishing houses that were considering them or publish them or all that, that's called cold querying. And that's like when a telemarketer comes up to you dials your number and talks to you about, do you have life alert? Have you fallen and can't get up? It's that kind of thing. So, unlike solicitors, you are actually being asked for your solicitation. But like I said, some presses will not take certain things. So always remember to check who you're sending to, check the guidelines thoroughly, check what kind of stuff they take, check their deadlines, all of that shit. Just like we did when I was talking about literary journals and magazines. Because one of the things they really want to do is find a reason you're not perfect for them. And if they can fuck you over by saying you addressed the wrong agent, or you sent like your first 5 pages instead of your first 5 chapters, if they can find a reason to get to you to know, they will. Your job is to be like, honey, we're perfect for each other. This will be a beautiful romance. Here's everything you wanted. So your job is to get them to the yes. And they have so many hopefuls like you, they can discard you unless you give them a reason to say yes. So find every reason for them to say yes. Get their name right. Get a very compelling query letter. Send it when they want it. Send how many pages they want. My publisher for both my manuscripts actually wanted my full manuscript. Generally, that's not what happens with a novel. A novel, they're just like, no, send us the first 10 pages, send us the first chapter, whatever, and we'll let you know. Also, one thing to be aware of is there will be a lot of non-responses in this, especially if you're pitching very busy publishers or very busy agents. So they will say something on their website like, if you don't hear from me in 3 weeks, the answer is no. So, as always, make sure you write down who you pitched, when you pitched, etc. And this is going to be very important because if they don't tell you they don't want you, you're going to be waiting for months and then you're going to be like, did you receive it? And then they're going to be like, well, yeah, you dope, and we rejected it because we told you 3 weeks and it's a no. So there will be times your email will go astray and you will not know it because the no response is a no is pretty common. And one of the reasons why one of the people in my writers group, one of our senior writers, he had said, fuck you to traditional publishing, was because he was so tired of not hearing even a no and them just being like, well, silence is a no. So don't be discouraged if you're not even getting rejection letters, but remember to record 3 weeks is a no, a month is a no, 10 days is a no. If they tell you they will pass on your book by whatever time period, you'll want to know that. So, all right, I think that covers pretty much everything. I fucking hope so. And I will see you hopefully Thursday for More Lost Judgment. I'm not exactly positive. Husband's been dealing with an abscessed tooth. He's going to get it pulled tomorrow. And we're hoping that kind of nightmare is over for him by then. So we will see. If you have any questions, find me on Twitter. Leave them in the comments below. The email address I gave you on my query letter a while ago that I showed you, the tolucaturtle@outlook.com, is actually my email address if you would like to send me an email about this stuff. I will help you as much as I humanly can or turtly can. And good luck. And remember, it's a numbers game. It's a waiting game. If you're very passionate about this, you got this. And there is no too late of an age to publish. So don't tell yourself if you're like 40 that it's over, if you're 50 that it's over, if you're 20 that it's over. Don't tell yourself that, because if you're breathing, it's not over and you can do this. So take care, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.